Good evening, it's Shirley with Spirit of Matter in a special Cosmology episode. Um, and I've been having these. I've had Jupiter in Aries in the eighth house of birthing, and non-dual experiences in my solar return chart, and there was an intensification of um, birth-related wisdom knowledge that began from fertility and conception, and now I'm actually getting birthing. So I would like to share with you my experiences, um, and the way that they are being integrated within. And that might contribute to awareness on the topic, as I feel that non dual experiences, what people call um, out of body or energy body or astral body or psychedelic experiences, not necessarily psychedelically induced, or ecstatic experiences that yield various states of consciousness, birth something into living. And I remember have basically a colleague, I'm not a social worker, but we're dealing with the similar things, that was sharing a story on social media publicly about his wife's birth. And one of the things he mentioned was the necessity of a woman to enter a basically trance state as she's birthing, assisted by a doula that's supposed to help her or hypnotize her to enter ecstatic state, which allows the gate or the transition of the human being from the inner belly into the outer world. And uh, following recording today's episode about Jupiter ingressing into Taurus together with the moon, when Venus and Mars are still in Cancer, this seems like a great conception moment, both on a mundane level, but also for a human being. And I couldn't help but connecting the dots between the way society sees non dual experiences, that is, out of body experiences, astral projection, or on the other range, psychic attack, people hearing voices that they don't understand or dislike, or having sensual feelings or senses, and what some people call psychosis, and the actual experience of birthing, which necessitate a non-dual experience that is ecstatic, so much so that the birthing person gets into a trance state and delivers. And so this birthing process necessitates a trance state, necessitates a non dual experience. And so both the orgasmic process, even before birth in children, necessitates a various level of a trance state or a non-dual experience that we experience when we either self-pleasure or have sex, energetically, astrally, or not. And the ability to release into this trance state is basically the ability to orgasm assists in babies, right? Um, and when we allow in our belief system, our culture, our religion, our tradition, for birthing to exist in everyday life, including these alternative or trans states or journeying or whatnot, as a part of the human experience, to be ushered through, validated, and lived, especially orgasmically. We assist as a society in both conception and birthing. That requires us as a society to, whichever our belief system is, allow for the sake of well-being, health, the fifth vital sign, endocrine system, and of course fertility and creativity, to give place to non-dual experiences. All the while, those things are being discussed as the margins of society that is subdued with medication. That being is not to with it's not to take away something that helps people deal, cope, uh, facilitate non-dual experiences. Okay, this is not when it is volitionally and consensual and coming from the patient, when they are being fully informed and granted granted facilitation with every side effect that they may have deal with, which is absolutely not the case today. And this is mad. This is maddening. But had that been the case, okay, it is absolutely not to take away the medicine from the people. It is to say that non-dual experience in essence are a part of the gate of life and probably death. We only have near death experience testimonials to go to, and we understand that such experiences exist. Okay? The big importance, the big emphasis here is in birthing a society, or birthing society as allowing for birthing. Transitions in life, okay, necessitate non-dual experiences as a trans state of birthing something new, opening a business, delivering a baby, saying goodbye to an old friend, loved one, or even pet, transitioning from one job to another that is more sustaining, taking up space in the world. Both on a mundane level, when we think to travel to space technologically, Uranus is not exempt from birthing. It actually is a part of it. And of course, birthing life and, of course, the dying process itself. When we as society have pathologized the process of healthy orgasm, healthy birthing, and healthy dying, and healthy transition, birthing a change in our lives, we have forgotten how to be. So many spiritual gurus talk about, or gurus as teachers, okay, um, talk about the spiritual process as remembering, a remembrance. Whatever are the circumstances, we probably had very good reasons as humanity to um, incarnate into the perception of materialism, of matter, as purely 3D physical. Okay? There were very good reasons for that. Okay? It's what do you do when you're overwhelmed emotionally, psychically, to count the leaves in the tree, to make calculations in your mind. Now you think about junctures such as two world wars and the succeeding crises and the succeeding two twin bombs. So the twin wars and then the twin bombs that were created by people with Pluto in the twins, also by people with Pluto Leo, Pluto Cancer, but initiated also by the twins. Okay, the twin sign. And eventually, all that much overflow had to be grounded. And what do you tell a person in this situation of sensory overflow? Okay, to find a certain fabric that feels nice and concentrate on that feeling, embodiment, to count the leaves on the tree, okay, focusing on the logical. This is one of the people that advanced this knowledge is Dan Siegel. Okay, but it talks about the faculties of the frontal cortex as grounding and helping, assisting in um, managing overflow in brain. So you kind of called it the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain or whatnot, or the back brain or whatnot. And what we need to understand is both the fact that the people who cannot allow for this birthing, they're not to blame, they're not to be shamed. This is why if a person, there's some people for at least certain periods of time do need a certain medication to help and facilitate these junctures of life for them. It's just too overwhelming. That is absolutely okay. Some people have been overflown to the point that they need this logic. They need to count the leaves. Okay. That being said, it cannot be the entirety of our healthcare system. It cannot be the prevailing dogma in the battle of scientific theories. And that is a natural contraceptive. Birthing is the gate of life and death. Here, something's being ushered in. And this is also birthing as conception, right? And dying is another gate. But in between, there are transitions in life that even with the best circumstances are transitional and do require for a regenerative state. In astrology, we talk about Pluto, especially in evolutionary astrology. We talk about Pluto as the cell regeneration. So, birthing and dying, the rejuvenation of cells. And then we have cell memory, and then we have the energy that goes through these cells. Then we have the gravitational waves, however tender, attached to the experience of having cells in the body. And then we have whatever is the experience of light. But you say, surely, light is a physical term. How do you connect it with experience? Didn't you just say that seeing the mind as brain and neural activity is wrong? Well, yes, and no. We are both neurons operating or in cells regenerating, and the experience of that in astrology is quite easy to see. Pluto governs the nuclei, the cell regeneration, as well as deeply psychological transformative experience. Depth, not depth as the sense of being in depth, but depth as the sense of the underworld that is also the above. And from this vantage point, the psychological and the scientific are very much related. One cannot be reduced to another, and that the same goes for saying energy as that phenomena that engineers talk about, and energy is that phenomena that already physicists are talking about, which embeds a certain spiritual experience. And the various interesting phenomena of light and waves that allow for transforming one form of energy to another, and for the non-duality. We talk about light, okay? The simple cliche electrons waves thingy, that works. And we recently are beginning to talk about using the time to locate something in space and to manage its place in space. So we're beginning to get a hold of something, although the nature of dynamic nonlinear system is that once you get a hold of that, it mutates. Okay? Mutates not in the sense of undesired mutation, but it transforms. You just gotta grasp it out, boom, it changes. You gotta grasp it out, it changes. You gotta grasp it out, it changes. Life is ever interesting, fascinating, eternal flare of consciousness that is existing. So we granted to not be bored for long. Though we may experience stagnation, there is also an eternal experience that is going to build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, explode, and that explosion is life, death, birth, orgasm, and the various A bombs and the terror attacks, which is the lesser benefic influences. Although some would say that that had to happen, and that caused that, and that changed, and so on and so forth. And so, when coming to the essence of it, it is so simple. This episode is so basic. It's not a smart episode. But it's important to bring it, even though it's not a brilliant episode. I'm not really connecting anything that was not connected before. Yet for some reason, people still get diagnosed as schizophrenic. Birthing people still are denied access to being in a trance to give birth, all the while having the facilitation of modern medicine. There's a reason for the technology that assists in saving human lives to be, and there is a reason for the natural birthing process to be. All the while, people who are having non-dual experiences, astral projecting, shared dreams, actual sex, near-death experiences are being questioned. And I believe your experience. Still, people who are being gaslighted, at least perhaps now it's changing, but it was a person was being gaslighted in their marriage, in their relationship at work, in therapy, and they would come to the healer, the social worker, the psychiatrist, and they would talk about their experience, and they would get the very educated and well-intending therapist saying, uh, trying to be and believe and validate their experience, but not their reality. While in fact, in those cases, it's the reality that you need to validate, and so it was counterproductive to healing and breaking that loop. And when people broke that loop, when it was done outside the world of therapy, they were like, "How come you use the word the narcissist? That's a DSM center. You're not a psychiatrist. Who are you to do it? A person who survived cases where some people get murdered, made it seem like a suicide, call everyone and disbelieved, hospitalized and drugged. Well, guess what? Landed here." And those experiences are not, those atrocities are not unrelated to fertility, to conception, to birth, to death, to transition in life. We also don't want to get to the point that a person is having an experience that to them is horrid, and we're like, this is all a part of the process. Like, we also don't want to gaslight people to the other way around. Okay. All it really takes is listening. All it really takes is listening, with holding space that this person is speaking a genuine reality. And the gap between worlds makes it difficult for them to interpret and for you to understand. But what it holds for us all is the prevalent lack of experience with this type of being, and the various stories we need to live and tell ourselves in regards to these questions of life and death, birth and the spirit and the matter, so on and so forth, um, that support our well-being. Okay, if a person is very overflown, perhaps they need to count the leaves. What if this person is pregnant? Well, maybe it's best for them to arrange for a C-section. All the while, when a person desires to get into this trance state, they definitely should have emergency assistance available. But he also must have allowance to get into this trance state, to orgasm in front of everybody, and square the baby to life. This is a lived experiences. How compatible are the spaces that we hold to birthing and transitioning? How comfortable you feel when you hear the neighbors making love? How natural it is for you. How much space is in a living unit for someone to get orgasmically enthralled and bring life in? The birth, and that's another interesting thing. The birthing process itself, although you know you are expecting, you never know when, and you never know how. And it's always a surprise when it actually happens. Same as death, same as transitioning. You know something's going to happen, especially if you're an astrologer and you're like, well, I see I have this eclipse on this and that axis. Well, this means my housing, this means my job, this means my relationship. And you don't really know what or what was going to happen. And so it's always a surprise. Oh, that happened. Oh, that happened. And you get into this trance state when it does. You do something that is fated to bring life, or something dies. It's always surprising. When it does happen, it's always surprising. Even if you knew that, even if you were expecting for that, it's always surprising when it does happen. We're human beings. We all have various degrees of ability to surrender and to know when to surrender and when to manage, when to interfere, however gently or however tenderly, gently in the process of birthing in our life. And so the pathologizing of this process is literally the pathologizing of life itself. That being said, we must not take away assistance, witnessing, validating, and if needed be, the possibility to have whether psychedelics or weed or certain drugs from the people who desire it, volitional consent is key, as well as emergency caretaking. If a person chose to have a home birth, and I'm half Israeli, half Dutch, in Netherlands, most births are home births. There's a public health system, it's not operating. There are actually doctors from Israel, certain doctors from Israel come to lecture. In Israel, the other way around. If a woman has home birth and a doctor assists her to get emergency treatment that she needs, we have a doctor that is in jail. I have a Facebook friend who is a doctor who was assisting in these cases, and he's, I don't know if he's still, but he's in jail for unifying the worlds of medicine in favor of facilitating life. So that's something to be informed of. And basically, with that, I'll end with the blessing that we are supportive and facilitating and blessing life itself. And enjoying and indulging and can be ecstatic and be supported throughout the process um, of birthing in our lives, whichever birthing in our lives. Thank you.